Hello and welcome to the Sounding Board, a weekly program produced and directed by the members of Seroptimus International of Novato. I'm Sylvia Berry and I will be your host today. Seroptimus International of Novato is a local association of business and professional women whose primary mission is to improve the lives of women and girls through programs leading to social and economic empowerment. The Sounding Board provides us the opportunity to learn about issues that are close to our heart. As a generation with great interest and resource to stay healthy, and with social media overload, we are bombarded with nutrition-related news and advertisements from various sources. If not used carefully, can have an adverse effect on our health. To address that, today's topic is nutrition in the news. And it is my pleasure to introduce Kim Kulp, who is a registered dietitian with a BA from UC Davis, graduate work, and an internship in dietetics from San Francisco State University. She has a private practice with offices in Novato and Mill Valley and works as a clinical dietitian at Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital. She specializes in digestive health and also counsels individuals and groups in sports nutrition, weight loss, and medical nutrition therapy. Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for coming here again and give us an update on what is new in nutrition. This is your third time here, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So you're a registered dietitian. What sets you apart from nutritionists, which we kind of hear so much about?
It is confusing, but there is a big difference between a registered dietitian and the term nutritionist. The term nutritionist is well known, but it's not a protected or credentialed title. So essentially anybody can become a nutritionist. They don't need any education, they don't need any training. They can put up their business name, put up a website, and offer nutrition, and no one would know the difference. A registered dietitian is the credential for nutrition and requires education beyond a bachelor's. Then there's also a required year of supervised training where you work in a variety of different areas of nutrition before you're even allowed to sit and take the national exam. And then once you've passed the exam, you still have to stay up on research and get to keep your credential going. So there's a big, big difference. A little bit of education and training that separates the two.
And a lot of practicing.
A lot of practice,
right? Yeah. So back to the topic we're going to talk about today. So there's a lot in the news lately about fats and what we should be eating. I think the million-dollar question for me is butter safe?
Is butter safe? And that is a big question on a lot of people's minds, a lot of the people that come to see me, because there's so much confusion. And a lot of that is based on a big article that came out in the New York Times and Time Magazine about a year ago with the headline, "Butter is Back." And the idea was that new research has shown that saturated fat, which is the reason that we're avoiding butter to try to keep healthy, isn't really harmful. And this was a big article that was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, a very well-known, well-respected, peer-reviewed journal. But it was a meta-analysis. And a meta-analysis means that they pool together a big group of different research articles. And someone sorts through and decides which ones to include and comes up with a kind of an almost averaged outcome. And from that, they came up with this idea that maybe saturated fats aren't so bad. And the media ran with it. The downside of that is no one heard the parts later when the criticism came out that this was not a well done article at all, that this was meta-analysis actually, and that some of the the articles that were included or the findings that they kind of came up with from looking at it weren't really accurate. And so what got missed in the media was the interpretation later by some of our big experts in nutrition and medical science. So no, butter isn't back in that it's not healthy. And at the same time this is all going on, the American Heart Association has actually been recommending to reduce the amount of saturated fat in the diet for people who have high cholesterol. And just to clarify, saturated fat is what we would find in meats, cheese, butter, and ice cream. It's the type of fat that is not healthy for our hearts or for our brains when it comes to trying to avoid things like stroke.
Okay. So, okay, that's kind of sad though.
Yeah, I know. People want to believe.
Okay,
But unfortunately, I'm
absolutely.
here to ruin the fun.
Okay. So how about coconut oil?
Coconut oil has become very big, and it just doesn't seem to be going away. And again, going back to saturated fat, it isn't magical. It is very saturated. And in fact, coconut oil has more saturated fat than butter or lard. And while some of the buzz out there is that coconut oil is healthier, that it has some properties that make it healthy regardless of that, that really hasn't been shown in the science. What we do know is that it raises LDL, which is the bad cholesterol. It also seems to raise the HDL, which is the good cholesterol, which is the part that people want to grasp onto. But overall, it is raising the bad, which is what can lead to heart disease. So it still can't be recommended as an oil to use for your health. Just like anything, a little bit, on occasion is one thing, but including this as the oil that you would use in most of your cooking is not a healthy choice. And the healthier choices would be olive oil or canola oil. And their fatty acid profile, that's the fats that are in those particular oils, are the kind that's called polyunsaturated or monounsaturated. And those are the healthy oils for our hearts and all of our blood vessels. And the real research on heart disease has been showing us that to prevent it, we want to take any part in our diet where we had saturated fat, like anywhere you might use butter, and replace it with those healthy oils. So replace your butter with canola oil or vegetable oil. Anywhere that you might be using, cheese, maybe see if you can use something like avocado, which is a healthy oil. Nuts have healthy oils. So it's swapping out the unhealthy fats for the healthy ones. That's where you really see a benefit to your health. Not replacing it with something like refined carbohydrates, which is something like processed foods or sugars or white flour. You want to replace it with the healthier fats.
Okay, makes sense. And I have another question.
Okay.
Eggs. Long time ago, you can eat all the eggs, and suddenly, cholesterol, you can't eat eggs anymore, egg white and stuff like that. So now I think it's coming back again. Let me ask you this: do we not have to worry about cholesterol in our food anymore?
And that's a great question, because this was just in the news recently, and the new dietary guidelines that are being created are no longer recommending having to avoid cholesterol in the food. And the reason being is that cholesterol itself in food isn't what raises our bad cholesterol. That's the LDL cholesterol. And it's actually the saturated fat that does that. So avoiding the cholesterol isn't going to necessarily keep your cholesterol levels down, which was originally thought. However, often they go hand in hand. So you have to be careful, because very often if you have a high saturated fat food, the cholesterol level is high too. Now those exceptions are things like you said, eggs, or the other one is shellfish. Shrimp, calamari, they all have some higher levels of cholesterol, but very little or no saturated fat. So those are healthy foods. But the other foods that also have cholesterol, like cheese and meat, those have the high saturated fat, and those you do want to avoid.
So what's the difference, bring you back a little bit, what's the difference between good and bad cholesterol?
Well, LDL is when, if you look at your lab results, those are the low density lipoproteins, and those are the ones that we see a greater risk of heart disease. The HDLs actually kind of go through your blood and bring the bad cholesterol back to your liver and take it out. So those are the ones that we want to see a higher level. And diet can do that, exercise can do that. Exercise can help raise the HDLs, and to lower your LDLs, you want to avoid saturated fat, and again, refined carbohydrates. And as I said, that's going to be your more processed foods. A lot of white sugar, a lot of white flours. If you eat whole foods, if you eat fruits, vegetable, whole grains, then you're not getting those processed carbohydrates, and then you're having healthy foods.
Okay. So there are a lot of diets we keep hearing about, like gluten-free diet and the paleo diet. Did I say it right?
Paleo diet?
Paleo diet, there we go. What are they, and what do they do for us?
All right.
For us?
Well, I'll start with the paleo diet, because that has been around for a while, and it just doesn't seem to go away. It seems to be getting bigger. We even now have restaurants that are opening that are paleo restaurants. And it was actually started by a group of cross-training. It kind of goes along with that brand. The idea that we should eat the way the cavemen ate, and therefore the diet is strictly meats, vegetables, and fruit, and it does not allow for any dairy, any grains, or any legumes, legumes meaning beans. And first of all, the problem there is when you take out so many food groups, you limit some of the nutrients that you can get, because each food group has a variety of different nutrients, which is why we come up with this kind of food group idea of balancing what you need. And then the other thing is it's taking away some very healthy foods. So the idea that because the caveman didn't eat grains and beans, that we shouldn't eat them now doesn't really make sense. First of all, we don't really know what the cavemen ate. It really depends on where they lived, and most of them didn't live past 30, so it's not necessarily a great, great comparison. But we do know that when you have a diet and you take out of those kind of groups, you're going to eat a lot more meat. And most people that come to me that are on the paleo diet are actually eating a pretty meat-heavy diet. Granted, they're eating a good amount of vegetables and fruits, and that's fabulous, but we really know that the greater amount of plant foods that you include in your diet, the better your health. And that affects heart health, your brain. And when I say brain, it's to avoid strokes, to keep your blood pressure down. The one diet that continues to rise to the top, if you want to say a set diet that's been studied, is called DASH. And yet no one talks about that. And DASH stands for Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension. And what that one is similar to what we think of as the Mediterranean diet. It's lean meats and fish, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and low-fat dairy. But in very, very small amounts of the meat and the protein foods. So the majority of your foods are going to be the vegetables, fruits, and grains. So whenever we see this, we see people's blood pressure go down, their cholesterol levels go down, it's because there's a combination of different minerals and vitamins and fibers in that diet that lead to better health. And you had asked about gluten-free, is that right?
Yes,
okay.
I did.
Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Good memory.
Gluten-free, again, is huge, and it came out of the 1% of the population that needs to follow that have celiac disease, which is actually an autoimmune disease that attacks the small intestine if you eat gluten. Maybe we figure 6 to 7% actually have gluten sensitivity, but most people who avoid gluten think it's healthier or think it's a way to lose weight, and that is not the case. In fact, a lot of gluten-free products have more calories than their other natural gluten-containing counterparts. And it's certainly not healthier, because if you can eat the foods that have gluten, the wheat, barley, rye, then you're getting a lot of really good, healthy nutrients. A lot of times people are doing it because they're having stomach problems, and they really don't know what is causing them, and they try to do this because they've heard about being gluten-free. The problem with that is, first, if you have stomach issues or anything that you can't explain, definitely want to have it checked out by your doctor before you self-diagnose yourself. And the other thing is, very often it's not the gluten. I work as a digestive health specialist in my practice, and the majority of people that come to me, we find can be helped by something called FODMAPs. And FODMAPs stands for fermentable oligodimonosaccharides and polyols. Okay. And what does that stand for? That is that's the acronym for, or that's the chemical structure of a variety of different carbohydrates. So for some people, they might avoid gluten, which is actually a protein, because when they eat wheat, it bothers them. But it may not be the gluten. It might be the carbohydrate part of the wheat. And when you know that, when you find that out by trying different diet approaches, by working with a registered dietitian who specializes in that, then you can find out, maybe I could have a little bit and not have to avoid it completely or eat all these processed gluten-free foods, and open up your diet a little bit more. Because ultimately, you always want the most varied diet possible so that you can include the greatest variety of nutrients.
Okay. So here's a very fun subject. How about bulletproof coffee? Okay.
Bulletproof coffee. It goes back to our coconut oil. Bulletproof coffee was started as a special, enhanced coffee that some people are doing this. They're finding it online. They actually are hoping that you'll buy their special coffee. But ultimately what it is you take your cup of coffee and you add butter, grass-fed butter, and coconut oil, or MCT oil, which is kind of a refined version of coconut oil. And the idea is that it makes you leaner, more energized, able to concentrate more. Well, ultimately, you now have a 400-calorie cup of coffee. So it may make you feel more full because there's a lot of calories in there, and it's a lot of calories from saturated fat. So there is nothing magic about this coffee. And I would always prefer, with anyone I was working with, that they actually ate food with a variety of nutrients than a cup of coffee with a lot of saturated fat.
Okay, now take care of that for me. Okay, how about grains? Should we be avoiding that? And I heard about, my son told me about, I've been cooking my rice the wrong way.
I know what you're referring to, and it just came out maybe a week ago. So people may have just been starting to read about it themselves, about there's a new way to cook rice that can reduce the calories in it. And what they're talking about is something called resistant starch. And resistant starch can be found in rice, but it can also be found in pasta and potatoes. And what happens is when you cook those foods and then you cool them, it actually changes the starch molecules in them so that your body doesn't always absorb all of it. So the cooking of the rice, the way to do it to create the resistant starch is to add a little bit of olive oil or any oil. The research was, or the article that was based on research and then kind of came up with some conjecture actually too, was that you add a little bit of coconut oil to your rice, but it really could be any oil at all. And then you cool it for about 12 hours in the fridge, and then you can either reheat it or eat it cold in a salad, and that you're gonna maybe not absorb maybe 10 to 15% of the calories. Now, the articles have come out and said it could be up to 50, but there isn't really anything to show that. It's just a thought maybe it could be that much, but about maybe 10 to 15%. So you could reduce a little bit of the calories, but probably not enough to make a huge difference. If you enjoy eating the rice the way you've been cooking it, go right ahead.
Oh, go right ahead. Yeah, I can plan 12 hours ahead anyways.
But that goes back to what you said, should we be avoiding grains? And the answer is no. Grains are incredibly healthy. And there are these variety of different fibers in the grains, like you brought up with the rice. The resistant starch isn't necessarily a fiber, but it acts as one in our systems as a type of fiber. And we have a variety of different fibers from the different fruits and vegetables and whole grains that we eat, and they all benefit us in a different way. Some fibers actually help regulate our blood sugar so that we have less spikes and make it easier for someone who is trying to avoid, maybe if they're pre-diabetic, it's a good way to eat, or just to avoid the ups and downs of energy with blood sugar drops. And it can keep your digestive system healthy. And ultimately, what we're starting to find, and there's more and more studies coming out, and it's going to be continuing for a while, is the studies of our microbiome. Have you heard this? Okay, so within us, we have a whole world of bacteria, yeast, all these microorganisms that live within us. And everyone's can be a little different, but we do seem to think that greater diversity in these organisms is better. And in order to have that, you need to feed them well. And these different fibers feed these organisms. And as crazy it is to think, these little critters inside of us are actually communicating with our cells. And we've even seen cases where they can be linked to depression. If you have the wrong kind of bacteria inside you, that's communicating with cells that way. So still a lot more research coming, a lot more to learn, but it does show that the way we eat can definitely affect this microbiome and our health.
Okay, thanks. And how about our favorite subject, like probiotics or prebiotics?
And that goes to that same, a lot of people think, well, I can just take a probiotic and I can have all the same benefits of having all this great, good bacteria, which is what a probiotic is. And there are foods that have the probiotics. So, things like yogurt or kefir and some other fermented foods that we see have these beneficial bacteria in them. And those are all great to include in your diet. You have to be careful with some of the fermented foods that have a lot of added salt if you're someone who might be salt sensitive as far as your blood pressure. But including these, it can be a healthy way to add the balance or the diversity. Some people want to take a probiotic, and that's fine. There hasn't been any negatives or anything if your immune system is healthy towards taking a probiotic. But the thing is, I always say to people when they come to me and say, I take probiotics, and I always ask them, what kind? It's kind of like saying I take medicine. How much do you take? What kind do you take? And why are you taking it? Because probiotics have been studied for the specific strain of bacteria that's in them. And so we'll look at a strain and we'll see what it does beneficially. Some help with GI issues. Some help if you're taking antibiotics so that you don't have an upset stomach afterwards. Some have been helped to improve immune function. So we see a variety of things where they benefit, but it is a specific strain. So you want to know that you're taking the right one and you're taking the right amount of the one that you're taking. Now the other thing with taking a probiotic is that it's a supplement. And the problem with supplements is it's an unregulated industry. So you never really know what you're taking. Just because it's on the shelves of a very well-known store or grocery store doesn't mean it's been studied for it to be what it says it's on the bottle. Everyone thinks if it was at my store, then it must be safe. And that's not necessarily the case. Again, unregulated. And often we have outside groups that look at these different supplements in general and will analyze them and find out that what it says is in them is not what's in them. Sometimes it's nothing. It's sawdust. Sometimes it's contaminated with something that could be unhealthful, like mercury or cadmium. And sometimes it actually even has pharmaceuticals in it. So it's a little bit, you're sometimes playing with fire with supplements. And the people that I work with, when they come to my office and they want a supplement, or if one makes sense for them, then we make sure to find one for them that has been studied by an outside organization to make sure that they're really getting what you're supposed to be getting and in the right amount.
Okay, thanks. So we're pretty close time-wise. One more question I have. How about women? I heard about a study that women get breast cancer if they eat soy. So is that true that we have to avoid soy?
Actually, no, and there's a kind of I think, misunderstanding with soy. There's naturally occurring soy, like edamame and tofu and tempeh, soy milk. Did you grow up eating soy products?
Yep.
Okay. So many of the Asian cultures, this is normal, and if we eat the whole soy foods like that, and we eat them more along the lines of the way your other cultures would eat soy naturally. So it's 1 to 2 servings a day. That's actually can be protective. And the research has actually shown that when girls eat it before puberty, they have more protection against breast cancer as they age. And we're now seeing that even breast cancer survivors, that including some whole soy can actually be protective. So the fear used to be that soy could possibly encourage more breast cancer because it's got phytoestrogen or plant estrogen in it. But the research has shown that's not the case. It can actually be protective. What you do want to maybe be avoiding if you have a family history of breast cancer or if you've been through treatment yourself is some of the soy products where they process the soy and they kind of squeeze out the proteins and concentrate them. So some of the energy bars have a lot of soy protein in them, and some of the kind of the soy meats, you know, the fake meats made out of soy, those are kind of a manipulated soy, and those are a little different than eating naturally occurring soy foods.
Okay, thanks. So what kind of service do you provide in your practice, and who should be looking for your advice, and how do they find you?
Well, I have a website. My company is Health Tastes Great, so you can look up healthtastesgreat.com. And again, I have an office in Novato and in Mill Valley, so I reach people from all over Marin as well as San Francisco. And even people who don't live in the area, I work with them by phone. So there's a lot of options depending on what works for you know, everyone's schedules.
Great. So
and usually work with people one-on-one. Sometimes I work with couples or families, and it's to work with whatever their goals are to help them find the best balance in their diet, nutrition, usually using foods that they really like.
Okay, thank you. Well, we kind of run out of time, so thank you very much for coming, Kim, and for giving us the latest news in nutrition, as always. And I also want to thank Seroptimus International for making the program possible for us, and thank Buck Institute for research on aging for the use of this state-of-the-art facility. And our studio engineer, Leon Johnson, is always here to help us. And special thanks for the viewers who tune in every week, and see you next week. Thanks.